Okay. I've been listening to your discussion here. My comment is I hope you get it to CRA's management. It's an excellent example of what is going on out there. And it's very clear as you explain it. I'd forgotten a lot of the story, but I really didn't find it interesting. So, David asked me to talk a little bit about what CATA is doing and trying to do and what we are encountering in the process of seeing about how you could approach improving this thing. We started off focusing on what had happened because every time we tried to say that something was changed, CRA came back at us and said, no, there's no change. The policies have all remained the same. That's when we took a look at the actual amount of money the CRA was processing. We had at that in 2007, 2008 discussions with the Minister's Office about the program. And they brought in a consultant to take a very close look at it, Mueller. And the outcome of his report was a report that emphasized how fast the program was growing and that he couldn't see that there was evidence of any change in policy of CRA, although we were all saying that there was at the time. Where that has led to was trying to get across and find some evidence that something actually had changed that a politician and an MP would understand. That's where we came up with the $5.3 billion and saying that that is the at least that amount of money has been lost in 7 years from support for innovation by CRA's focus on compliance. That was the message we have tried to get across. I think it's working. They are interested and they're talking about it. So that was one objective that we've had, which we're making some progress with. What are we hearing from people out there? Well, in the ITC sector, it really isn't very positive as far as the smaller the private corporations are concerned. If they're audited, they find the audits are unacceptable, they're tough, and they don't like the program. It's the commentary we're getting back. What they're confused about is what has happened. Why has there been that change? And I thought maybe I should just give a little explanation of that for you, having been around for the 35 years that I have. Back when IC86-4 was written, it was not a product produced by CRA's people. It was produced by a select committee of senior scientists and technologists across the country who were brought together to write it, and particularly they focused on what was experimental development. And what you can see happening in the last 10 years or so has been the shift in CRAs to a very different focus than they said was the only way you could handle the breadth of what is ED in industry. Specifically, what they did not focus on the scientific method, as Judge Bowman did and others have done. They focused on a much broader development model for experimental development, a nonlinear model, and this leads to a much broader way of focusing and defining projects than is currently occurring in what I'm seeing and hearing about, and a narrowing of interpretations. Secondly, the advice the government got at that time was that the legislation itself was confounded in terms of its relationship between what is supported at SR&ED and what is commercial. There are a number of spots in it that just simply contradict themselves. It's what Justice said to us at the time this was being developed. And so the committee said, you've got to recognize that industrial engineering occurs in an environment where the goal is working through in the commercial setting, or to a commercial product, or something that is commercialized. And it's your way you approach the support has to reflect this. And I.5 was meant to do that. We're now hearing a significant number of claims that are being tossed out because they're literally being conducted too close to that commercial edge. They're not eligible in terms of what used to be SR&ED, but that they simply are commercial as a way of getting them out. The other point, the original people who developed policy for the government, was that experimental development, the major portion of it was incremental, and a lot of it was very incremental. Again, the shift has been to an argument by CRA that we are hearing that is standard practice. Well, even when there is a significant improvement in the knowledge of the technology and the technologies that are being used. That has led to what we see as probably a halving of the growth rate, which concerned the minister's consultant at the time, to about 5% from about 11%. And it has also probably explains the $5.3 billion that we're looking at. So there's where we have come from in this discussion. I think that many in the community and the government now are accepting that a change has occurred, even in CRA. So where does this all come together? Well, what we have seen is that the government has called upon a new committee panel to give them advice on innovation programs and their revision. They've announced that they will do a review of SR&ED, but they'll also do a review of the government programs as well. What does this mean? Well, to be frank about it, we couldn't figure it out, and we couldn't find anybody in the government who could explain it for the last 6 months since it was announced in the budget. We are beginning now to get to a point where we're discussing it with finance, and what we're hoping for in the near future is to come up with some clear explanation as to what the process for the SR&ED review will be. I would hope that we will have it by January. Where do we think this should go, or where do we think we're suggesting that it might go? Well, we think that there needs to be a very strong focus on the effectiveness of tax credits, tax mechanisms that promote innovation in business. We think that the community supports this, and we think that the community is going to need to bring it across to Trudeau's government that this is needed. We think the opportunity is there. But beyond that, we think that we're going to have to deal with and work with, and the community is going to have to deal with the fact that the legislation itself is, sorry about that, quite convoluted in itself, as we've heard from in the court cases, etc., and even your own discussions of it here. That needs to be dealt with. So again, we think that a panel, a group of senior people, independent individuals, need to take a look at the way the program is being managed and the way the legislation is being shaped so that it actually can work efficiently. Finally, what can you do? Well, if you see that change will help, if you think that the programs can be improved and there are ways to improve it, it is really up to all of you out there to get this point across of what would be useful solutions and that beneficial changes can be made. Because I think there's, in some people's mind, that there's a great deal of doubt whether SR&ED can work. Not those of us who use the program, but people who like to manage program delivery instead of SR&ED. Now, I'll take some questions if you have any, and we can go from there.